Whoa. Hi, Neil.
Hey, Precious, how are you?
I'm good.
Happy Monday.
Welcome. Happy Monday. I mean, it was July 4th over the weekend. I think it was on
Yeah,
Friday.
so
Yeah.
yeah, it was a long
Hope you,
weekend. So
you enjoyed yourself.
yeah,
A
yeah,
lot of
I
people
took a
were
break.
happy. Yeah.
um,
All right. So, yeah, another interesting week on AI.
hmm
We have a
hmm
lot of interesting things to cover today. Like, I wonder, we've canceled out like about five, six, seven news because, of course, we can't cover everything. We just have barely 30 minutes to do this. So, we have a news from Anthropic Claude Code. We have something from Google. Google restore free API access for Gemini 2.5 for
hmm
developers. We have the news about Facebook and OpenAI, the fight
Oh
on
yeah,
talent
right,
skill.
right, right.
Yeah, we also have some updates from LangChain. LangChain, they made some major updates, just to update, some of the stuff for developers that are doing. And then I can see that the main story here today is context engineering, which is also the topic for this
Yeah,
for
yeah.
this.
Context engineering. I've been playing with this idea because there's going to be core for agent link that we're building. So I'm
Yeah.
going to share some of the stuff that I'm exploring and learning. I think that would be useful for everyone.
Oh wow, nice. Okay, I guess we should get started.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So I think I'm on cue here. The first story is from Google. So I know we mentioned this a few times already in our podcast that I think the agentic coding and software development is pretty hot in the enterprise space. But
Yeah.
when it comes to mobile app development, it was lagging for a while. They're a little behind in terms of what tools are available. So it's good to see that there's having some major progress. Right, last week we covered about Apple is trying to partner with Anthropic to bring sort of AI agentic development for iOS app. But today we're going to be talking about Android Studio. So Android Studio is finally getting something they're calling an agent mode with Gemini Assistant. This will essentially sort of lands on Android Studio Narwhal feature drop canary. So there will be a new tab where you can start to interact with Gemini. I think this will be a tremendous win for folks that are heavily into mobile app development.
Yeah.
So you can have that same idea, sort of V0 lovable type. You can quickly mock up and build mobile apps, which I think could be super valuable. So it automates some of your tasks. I mean, it's multi-step, obviously, since it's agentic. It helps developers to test, refactor, even sort of help them be creative, right? You can, well, some of the demos I saw that you can sort of give an idea and it will build an app for you. Um, so that's exciting.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting though because Android development is something that I think is one of the major updates, technology updates we've had in this century. I mean, when Google Play Store launched, everybody started launching apps on Play Store, Apple iStore, So
Mm,
apps on my phone, I have more than 20 apps right now. So
yeah,
we've not had a lot of lovable Cursor, those guys, they could build, I mean, they can write code, right? But none of them are
yeah.
specifically, oh, my major target is mobile apps, right? I think
Mm,
Apple has something of mobile apps for their for Swift, right? I don't know
yeah,
if
yeah.
you really caught up,
Xcode.
right? Yeah, Xcode. So I don't know if you really caught up, but then this is a really interesting one. That
Yeah,
ecosystem, I played there. I think I did Java at some point. I did some mobile
mm,
app development at some point.
mm,
Yeah, so
mm.
I know how heavy it can be. I know how that space can be sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to
I
be
know
a
I know I know developers were looking for it. I mean, when we talked to developers, they were saying, "Hey, I mean, is there
yeah,
when we will get agents for mobile apps?" So it's finally here.
yeah. We're finally here. All right. So talking about mobile apps, so Kuso they launched. Yeah, so we have Kuso on the web, right? We
Hmm.
have it on the web.
Mainly in VS Code, right? It was mainly IDE based.
Mainly IDE based. So they launched the web version of Koso over the week. I think it was last week. Well, during the
Mm-hmm.
week. Yeah, because we always review 1 week. Yeah. So during the week they launched the mobile. version of Cursor. So you can now go in there, connect your GitHub, assign a project to it. Everything is on the web, right? But then the interesting part of it, as we are talking about mobile app, is that you can also do this thing on mobile. So you can check up on your project while you're going on a run, or you're on a walk, or you're walking your dog, you're just outside chatting with people. You can check up on your project. You can even assign tasks using your mobile phone, which is really, really convenient for. I think it's going to be super convenient for those that are on, you know, for developers, right? It's almost like a productivity hack because you don't even need to have your laptop with you or go out with your laptop. So
Right.
they check
Right.
up with project while you're out. So now it's
Right.
hands free for dev. It's team centric workflow. So then now you'll be able to like work with your team no matter where you are. And then also they have this Slack integration that comes with it. So simply what they're saying is you can code anywhere and everywhere, which I think is really interesting.
Now, Slack integration is very powerful. I mean, I know we are startup, we don't use Slack, but Slack is pretty
Yeah,
common in enterprise. And
yeah,
the reason this is interesting is that because most of the enterprise teams have their own dedicated Slack channel where you're having conversation. Let's say you're a
yeah,
distributed team, right? So most of the conversation happens in Slack, like your debugging issue or a developer assigns an issue. So having
yeah,
cursor right there, I think it's super smart because now cursor, when you tag cursor, cursor can read the chat from the Slack to get the context what the issue is about,
yeah,
and use that to trigger a agent to kind of solve that problem. I think it's a super cool integration. I mean, this is where I think Devin started. So it's kind of
yeah,
amazing. It's kind of about time they're building this stuff because they now they're obviously directly competing with Devin right now. So
yeah. I think they
uh,
are they are they're already competitors because they're almost chasing the
yeah,
same
yeah.
customers. Yeah,
Moving out of the IDE is smart because now you. I mean, I think Slack integration is super powerful. And the mobile app could be nice because I know Replit has it, but I think Replit's idea is more like anyone can build mobile app.
yeah.
But in this case, it's
But
more
this
like devs using
is
it to sort
the
of manage their workflow. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
All right. So my next story is Anthropic. So Anthropic Claude Code, which is gaining lots of traction. I'll be honest with you. I've started kind of sort of playing with it a little bit. Um,
yeah,
so it added this concept of hook, which we also fundamentally had the problem when I was building the dev agent. Um, so our hooks was essentially script. So anyway, the idea is that they introduced this concept of hook, which came up last week. The goal is to now, in a specific point of workflow, when Claude code is working, the agent is working on your issue, there are specific hooks and points where you can jump in and add your code, add your flow, for an
oh,
example. So, for an example, if you want, so this happens in a terminal window, right? It's a sort of like an agent background process, right? So you can set a hook for notification. So you can customize Claude Code how you want it to notify you. Okay.
oh,
The next one is super powerful, which is automatic formatting. Formatting is a huge problem for this kind of flows. Cursor had this beauty because Cursor, since runs in IDE, VS Code sort of takes care of the formatting as you editing the file or you save the file. But when you're running something in terminal, when you're making delta code changes, is sometimes super hard to format it. And formatting is important for lots of folks and style standards, right? So now
yeah,
you can hook in your own formatter script. So every time Claude makes a code change, it will call your script. So essentially a set of bash commands that you can set, and Claude Code will invoke those commands in a specific point in the workflow. So this gives you much better control over completely relying on LLM to do your thing because
yeah.
LLM sometimes makes mistake, right? So this
Yeah.
makes it very deterministic. I think it's a great addition.
I mean, the fact that I can jump in while the
Yeah,
workflow is going. I say, oh, this part, I don't think you're getting it. Can you? I don't have to wait all the way to the end. I
yeah,
think
yeah.
it's going to be super
Oh, that's good.
helpful.
I mean, the feedback loop. That's exactly what it's talking about. So every time it makes code change, you can have a hook saying you're going to review the changes and provide a feedback. So you're
Oh,
absolutely right. Instead of waiting at the end of the PR where reviewing all the
yeah.
change, you can do just-in-time
Okay,
feedback. So that's smart.
yeah. That's a very smart one. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
So the next one is a story from Google. So they launched this Dopu, right? They said it's an AI virtual try-on app that creates a
Mm.
digital win. So I'm very interested in this story because I know a guy. I've been following this guy on Twitter that has been doing something like this for the past 3 years. So
Uh-huh.
so his own app is, I mean, this was pre-AI. He was heavy deep into AR, VR, virtual reality and augmented reality. So let's say you want to buy a table or you want to buy a headset and you want to know how it's going to look on you. You can easily just put up and join the app, select the headset you want, and then you have it on your head. Now Google is doing this and they're launching it for developers. The interesting thing here is that this is going to change how we build for e-commerce because Google is not just saying, "Oh, you have to come into our app." The plan is for them to launch an API because I read their blog. The plan is for them to launch an API, and then I am thinking that, oh, that means that people are going to change. It's going to really change the way we do e-commerce. So beyond, oh, I see this, I like it, I can easily try it on. So I see this clothes that I really like on the e-commerce website, I upload a picture of me and then I can have like a try on. You know the way you go to, you walk into a store, you have this room where you
Yeah.
can try on the clothes. Yeah,
Right.
so we can have something like that virtually on e-commerce website. So I think he's great. I think this is super, super cool. And then I can't wait for them to launch it globally because right now the version they have is only available for people in the US. If you're in the US, you have access to it. So if you're in Nigeria like me, you don't have access. But then yeah, I can't wait for them to make it global and then of course release the API and the other updates so that we can be able to try it out. And I can't wait to see what other people will build with it.
Is there an API for this? Like, do I have to be in the Google
Yeah,
store to
yeah.
use this?
So for now, you have to be in Google Store, but the roadmap says there will be an API for it for
Oh God.
developers. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So it's called Dopu. Yeah.
Crazy. I
DOP.
remember watching a demo. Yeah, I mean the commerce will change so much. I saw a demo where the product was about all you have to do is sort of, let's say you are selling a bag like handbag or purse or female woman apparels. So what
Yeah.
essentially what the product can do is that you can just upload the photos like you typically do for any product, right? You'll have a bunch
Yeah.
of photos of the product, but they
Yeah.
can take this now and combine them and generate a video. So before buying a bag, you can sort of have a 3D view of the bag, how the bag looks like from different angle, what looks like inside, all just generated.
Wow.
And they were talking about how that increases the conversion rate because that immediately, how when you buy expensive stuff like this, you don't know, well, I don't know how that's going to look for me and stuff. Video
Yeah.
usually helps with that. So
Yeah.
this is definitely
Sounds
a trend. Very interesting. All right, so we have some good news. The good news is that for developers, that Google finally restored the free API access for Gemini 2.5 Pro. I mean, I'm using this model more and more now. Gemini 2.5 Pro. I mean, it's pretty decent. But now they have opened a very developer friendly sort of free tier now. So you don't have to pay. You can get access to the state of art model. And we covered this last week also. Their API limits for some of the stuff that they're releasing out there is just crazy. The Gemini CLI, you get like
yeah.
1,000 API requests per day. That's good enough. I feel like I never have to pay for it.
Yeah.
So it's good. Thank you, Google, for doing this.
Yeah, I think Google is doing a lot of good work. I like to call it the Lord's work. So they are
Mhm.
giving us, I guess they are trying to play the big man game. I mean, we have all the money, we can give you free stuff, use our stuff, you're already in our
And and
ecosystem.
and they're looking for more data.
Yeah, and they're looking for more data. The more data they have, they are playing the long game. I think they're playing the long
Playing a
game.
long game. You're right.
There's
They're
been a
playing
lot
a long
of
game.
PR. people have been saying, oh wow, Gemini is this free, and then why are we not using it? I've seen people talking about 2.5 Pro, and a lot of people are saying, oh, developers are even saying, oh, this is cool. Some people are even using it as alternative to Cursor or Bolt.new. And I was like, okay, wow, this is good. Right.
Yeah.
So I think they are doing the Lord's work, and I think it's good. It's good for us, the users.
Mhm.
It's good for us, the users. So this is a very short story, very short one. Meta and OpenAI. So Meta is Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, and his people, right? So they are signing on developers for 100 million, $100 million, right?
So
So
I say to that that geeks are finally the new athletes. They are making
okay,
more than
yeah,
soccer
they're
players.
making more than athletes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, my football club Liverpool, they signed a player for I think 130 million euros, and people were like, "Oh wow, that's expensive." But this is a developer, a nerd, getting 100 million plus.
I mean, it's not just a developer. I'm sure. I forgot the name. I think that guy who I think is the main. I could be wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong on this. I think he was the main data scientist for O series model
Yeah, yeah.
for OpenAI. So
Yeah, yeah.
it
I think
definitely got street cred. That's why making so much money. So
yeah,
Meta got some really smart people they hired. Obviously, dropped an obscene amount of money to build this
yeah.
super intelligence lab. Right? What's the goal of this lab? Is that they're targeting to build AGI? Right? Is that the goal here?
I guess it's the race to AGI. Is the race to
Yeah.
AGI. Yeah, because I think this also ties to the next news I have. OpenAI
Yeah.
just announced GPT-5, right?
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm.
just announced GPT-5, and they are promising us. They said it's coming out this summer, and they're promising us faster. It's more going to be more sophisticated. It's going to be faster. It's going to support multimodal inputs. It's going to be better. I mean, they're just promising us everything, right? Which I like, but so tying back to the talents. So I guess the this news is interesting also because everybody's launching new models. Everybody's like depreciating old ones, giving us new
No,
ones.
I mean, I feel like OpenAI gotta suffer though, right? I mean, so we are talking about handful of people who truly understand how to optimize. It's not about building large language models anymore, right?
Yeah,
It's about it's about that trade secret of what works, what doesn't work, because we are in such a new space right now. I mean, we don't have we you cannot go in the store and buy book to know how to build this. There's no books
yeah,
for this, right? This is
yeah,
pretty cutting edge. People are trialing, figuring things out. So the reason for 100 million or 300 million signing bonus for 4 years is just crazy. Um,
yeah.
is is this guy's figured it out sort of what works, what doesn't work. So this essentially helps Meta to shrink down their timeline from 3 years to 1.5 years.
1.5. Yeah, yeah.
Right,
So I
right.
think I have it.
That's what Mark is paying for. Yeah.
Oh wow, wow. So I think I have a question, and this is for especially for people, maybe listeners who wants to
Mhm.
be, they are hearing this 100 million, they're hearing this 300 million, they're like, oh, I mean, if I get 10, if I get three, if I get one, I'll be okay, right? So so let's say someone wants to go into that field, at what point or at what um on the scale of chain, this is this like a supply chain, right? At what point
Yeah.
do they get in, right? Because I know this is not learning front end development or back end development, it's way
Yeah.
beyond that, right?
Yeah.
Some people have said, oh, you should implement machine learning papers, look for papers from Harvard, look for papers from this, and implement them
Yeah.
on your own, right? But then for our users, for our audience, especially those in our 2 billion community who are listening to this, who are mostly like newbies or intermediate developers. So at what point do they tap into this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult question, right? I mean, so we always have to follow the trend, right? What's important, what's not. I mean, one hand, people are getting $100 million for something. On the other hand, people are complaining that they're losing jobs, right? It's
Yeah,
weird in the
it's
different
weird.
states of the market, right? So I was in a conference a couple of weeks back, and someone asked a very similar question. I think it's things are changing so fast. It's impossible to say this is what you should do,
Yeah,
and you'll be good for next few years. God knows what's going to happen in a couple of years. I think I think the strategy you should follow is continue to experiment and be on the edges of this technology where you have a sense of what works, what doesn't work. Right? We're going to be
yeah,
talking about stuff like context engineering now, right? That's very hot space. And I feel like typically one of the this will be one of defining responsibility of any software developers going forward is that
yeah,
are you do you know what is context engineering, and you have to sort of know how to do what are the good things to do. Like back in days, people used to learn design patterns. So if you're a software
yeah,
developer, so you need to know design patterns, and they will ask you questions in interview. How do you do
yeah,
this? Why you do that?
yes,
I
yeah,
completely see that's happening with context engineering. People are going to throw problems at you saying you're using AI because that's a table stakes. We are using AI. There is no question about that. But
yeah.
when using AI, we are facing this kind of problem. How are you going to solve that problem for
How
us?
are you going to solve that
I
problem
think
for us?
that's what's becoming more important as a skill.
I mean, I think we're also going to see more and more of these concepts. I mean, before context, today is the first time we are talking about context engineering in this podcast,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Few
yeah.
weeks back, it was MCP. Everybody was talking
Right,
about MCP. So you need to know how
right,
MCP works, how to implement it as a developer, right? Just
yeah,
be on your toes, knowing that okay, there's this new concept, you read it, you understand it, you try to implement it, play with it,
right,
and then it helps to put you at the forefront of things because this is what the
right,
companies are going to need, this is what they are going to
right.
request for, right, in the coming months, right? So yeah, context engineering is popping. You should get into it now. So yeah,
Okay, cool. So, so just to be clear, context engineering is to I think the founder of I keep forgetting his name. The founder of Shopify probably coined this term, or maybe Andrej Karthapi. Maybe that he did this, but we used to call this prompt engineering. And I know we
yeah,
covered a lot about prompt engineering, how to prompt
yeah.
this. So prompt engineering sort of was doing similar thing, but context engineering is probably the appropriate name for this.
Oh,
So if you remember, and I always point that video from Karthapi, who was the OpenAI data scientist back in days. Now I think he mainly does teaching. So he has an amazing video about what is LLM for executive. You don't have to be a machine learning expert to know this. Maybe we should find that video. I will find that video at some point and put it out there in our Discord channel or even YouTube channel. You must watch for this. And one of the things that he sort of internalized, I'm talking about like a couple of years back, man, about this one, maybe a year back, when he talked about LLM is sort of a new kind of operating system, right? And it's sort of becoming an operating system. It's like a central piece that sort of has connection to peripherals like computer used through MCP, right? It can go to internet, connect to your terminal, go to browser, and all that. So this is, if you think about it conceptually, it is a computer. Um, so LLM is sort of an operating system for that. And if LLM is an operating system, then the LLM is like a CPU, and its context window essentially becomes the RAM, the memory. Now,
yeah.
if you know anything about computers, it's what you have on memory and how you use the memory becomes very, very critical for any applications to run. So if you think about it, context engineering is nothing but figuring out what should you put on that memory so
Oh,
that LLM can perform the next step correctly, right? And now
oh.
this is um this is sort of an art and science, right? There is no specific prescription I can give you. Do these three things and it will work.
So,
It's sort of something that you have to trial and error to figure it out what works for your app.
well, I believe that we are still going to the parts, the main story parts where we'll go deep dive into context engineering, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay,
So now,
yeah,
yeah. So then there was an other side of the story, and I was on that camp too. Now you see this large language models coming up with context windows, large context windows, right? Million
yeah.
tokens. And I think Meta had something which has like 3 million or 20 million. I don't know. The size of the context window is getting bigger and bigger. So
Yeah.
some point we got into the point where we said, screw this. Why do I care about all this engineering art? If context window is big enough, I will just put everything in there and
Everything.
forget about it.
Yeah.
Right? Oh,
Yeah.
context window. I just gonna put my million lines of code base to the context window and ask Gemini to do something for me.
Yeah.
But it turns out more stuff you put in the context window is actually doesn't improve the performance. In fact, degrades the performance of your application.
That's interesting. I
Yeah,
haven't.
that's what I was like. And I noticed that too, because as you sort of have conversation with agents and you build this chat history, the more
Yeah.
stuff gets in, it model will tend to get confused, and that's where sometimes hallucination comes in.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is obviously the context poisoning. That means as you're having conversation, right? Typically what this apps does is that as you're having conversation, it puts all the conversations log into the context window. It sort of
Okay.
makes sense because then you can refer to your history so that you don't have to specify the whole thing over and over again, right? That's what
Yeah.
ChatGPT does. You're having conversation. If you say, "What about the point number two?" It exactly know what you're talking about, right? That's
Oh
because it's
yeah.
storing in the context window.
Yeah.
But the problem is the moment some sort of hallucination slips in there, because in this case, sometimes model is making mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So those mistakes also stay in the context window, right? You're not removing them
Oh,
because
they're not
everything stays.
removing them. Yeah.
That confuses model. So
Oh,
the blog I was reading, it has a good example of like Gemini 2.5, which has a 1 million token context window or something crazy.
okay.
And they were saying that they were playing a Pokemon game and agent invented a wrong game state because it really got confused with large context window because there is
Oh.
some good, there's a bad information all mixed up.
So does this also means that RAG is
RAG is still
maybe
on.
RAG
RAG
is
is
still
still
on?
valid. Yeah.
Yeah.
RAG is. That's what I'm saying. That I was in the camp where when the large context window started showing up, I was questioning myself. Why do I do RAG again? What's the
Yeah.
point? Because I will just throw everything in there. Here is my Google
Yeah.
Drive. Find stuff. But it turns out it really doesn't work. I mean, it just
Yeah.
gets confused. So RAG is very, very much relevant.
Much
Uh,
relevant. Yeah.
and then this also ties back to MCP, right? There are what happens now, and I thought that was fascinating too, is when you start. This goes back to tools also, right? As MCP is becoming popular, and your app gonna start requiring multiple MCPs, right? So I need an MCP for GitHub server, I need an MCP to talk to my Salesforce, I need an MCP to talk to my Google Drive. I need MCP, Gmail MCP, all these tools that you start adding to your model.
Yeah.
Where is this information going in? To your context
Oh.
window,
Yeah.
right? So now there are some experiments done in that they were saying that more tools you add to the model,
More
it's
confused.
actually confuses the model more. So
Ah.
there's a sweet number like between 3 to 6 tools was great. If you start to add more than 6 tools to your LLM, it will start picking wrong tools.
Oh wow. So I think does this now define the statement that we always make that the guy with more data is going to win. Does this also now means that the more data you give it, it can become confused at some point?
Very
Depending.
confused. So now there's an issue with this too because I know the this MCP is cool. I'm gonna throw MCP in there. But when you
Yeah,
start building production app, so the typically how Precious models does is that every MCP MCP exposes tools, the tools will have a description. That's how model decides which tool to invoke, right?
okay.
Now imagine you taking this random MCPs from different providers and mixing in your app. Now each MCP can provide descriptions that could be conflicting with each other,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Then model gets really confused. Like, should I invoke the MCP1 or MCP3 because their descriptions looks very similar? Because you
yeah,
don't have any control over this MCP. This is third party you're downloading, right? So
yeah.
so that also becomes this what this guy is calling his context confusion because then it starts to make mistakes.
Wow. 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 Well, we have a
So
question in the chats.
okay.
We have a question in the chat, so we can come back to that, right? The question is from Manish Kumar. Manish said, I've done men full stack. What type of project should I work on? So I'm guessing, or maybe he's a full stack engineer and he's, hearing about the 100 million conversation that we had, the sign on bonus, and he's asking what kind of project should I work on?
Uh, well, sorry.
I
Anything.
want, off my head, I want to say build agents.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Build as
agree.
many agents as you can.
So there's a huge opportunity of building AI agents. Precious is absolutely right. Learn how to build AI agents. And what we talk about context engineering here is super relevant for AI agents. AI agents is the one that needs this context to operate successfully. And if
Yeah.
you can master this art of context engineering, you'll be like one of those on be 99.9 percentile, like the
Yeah.
top 5% who can really do this. So
Yeah.
yes, do that. So yeah, so there are a bunch of issues with that. So what I fundamentally want to zoom out and say is that larger context window necessarily doesn't mean it's a good thing. And
Yeah.
you always have to worry about, as a software developer, what you want to put in the context window.
Oh,
Now
right.
there is another thing I've noticed is that, and which I thought was fascinating, is the larger you make the context window, what model starts to think is that I should focus on what's in my history instead of actually doing reasoning. What I'm
Oh,
trying to say is that each of this model is smart, right? It knows what's right, what's wrong. That's why we call this reasoning model.
yeah.
But sometimes it gets lazy in terms of saying that, okay, I have this larger context windows, all these instructions. Maybe I focus on that and not my default reasoning.
Oh. So
So
he
that
just
means,
sticks to what he knows, more like
yeah,
sticking
it
to what.
just knows what is happens in the context window and forget about what it actually learned in the past, which could be a problem for what you're trying to do. So there
Yeah.
is bunch of stuff in there. One of the thing that obviously is saying that retrieval of correct information, that means RAG, is super relevant. It's probably more relevant now because as we this applications are becoming larger and larger, we have lots of MCP tools that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
RAG is becoming super informed. So one thing I found it really fascinating is that building RAG over MCP.
I
What that means
I
is,
think I think maybe we should go back. So you said building RAG over MCPs.
yeah, so RAG MCP. What that means is that, let's say if you have a typical app that have to deal with 10 or 15 tools, some could be external tools, some could be internal tools. That means 10 to 15 MCP servers. We just said that we cannot bootstrap 15 MCP servers in our context window because that will confuse the
Yeah.
model. Then how can you use large number of tools?
Yeah.
One way to do that would be selective of what tool you want to bring into the context window based on what problem you're solving. So one
Yeah.
way to do that would be it's a RAG. So you can do a RAG over description of our MCP tools. Then you can ask RAG to say, hey, this is the query, this is the problem I want to solve. Can you give me the relevant tools that I need to use for this problem? And it gives you the subset of the tools. And
Yeah.
those subset of the tools you add in the context window, which I thought was really, really smart. Instead of adding
So
15 every time, you add three or four.
that's like RAG MCP. So
Yeah, RAG
there's
MCP.
a RAG. The RAG calls the MCP that it needs to solve a particular task.
And
So
no, RAG,
you don't
no,
have
no, no,
all
no.
the MCP
RAG identifies what MCP
what
servers we need to solve this
we
problem.
need to solve a particular problem, right? So the RAG is a RAG of MCPs.
Yes, RAG of MCPs. Yes. So
RAG of
essentially, you take all the descriptions of the MCP servers and put it
yep,
in a
put
vector
on the
stream
RAG, and
and
then
do RAG on top of that. I saw some numbers in this. The numbers have drastically improved, and this becomes really, really important because it's not. It's real precious. I mean, there are apps out there who probably using more than 30 tools or 25 tools.
yeah.
Bootstrapping all
Imagine
these
an
tools in the
enterprise.
context, yeah, it's not. It doesn't work. I know by my experience when we build the BizDev agent, more tools we added, it started picking. It got really, really confused which tool to pick up.
Yeah.
So there are a bunch of stuff in here. So one of the blog that I thought was really fascinating is this blog. I know we had a Langchain conversation. This is a good one to read if you want to get more information on that.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you. I think that this is going to be super valuable for our listeners. This is going to be super valuable. Yeah. So I almost feel like we can even call it a day here because
Yeah, yeah,
this
totally.
is a lot. I mean, the last news I mean is just a release from Langchain, nothing.
Okay.
So maybe I should just go over it. So they did an update. So they call it an API upgrade. So this the upgrade is they have these custom views, yeah. So they call it the update introduce custom views for evaluation results and making it easier for teams to analyze and iterate on agent workflows. So what this simply means is that they create custom views for evaluating LLM agent output and performances, right?
This is
Online.
super critical. So I mean, can I jump in and say that
Yeah, sure.
I don't use a LangGraph Studio because I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty hands-on when I'm building this and trial and error. But one of the
Yeah,
things that they started using, and I'm a happy customer of LangChain, and we use Langsmith. Evaluation is another. Maybe we should do an episode just focus on that.
yeah,
Like, how can you evaluate that your agents are actually working?
yeah.
So this is a great feature.
This is a great feature. Yeah. So that was the update that they did. And then yeah, I think it's a good one for developers who are actively building on LangChain and using LangGraph Studio. So yeah, so you just run the evaluation directly inside LangGraph Studio, and then this improves transparency, and then also it accelerates debugging and optimization of LLM applications in prod, right? So product standard application. So yeah, I think it's an interesting one, right? So should we call it a day here? We've
Yeah, yeah,
talked
yeah,
about
totally.
context engineering
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So but then so the because the topic says the art of context engineering. So context engineering is the delicate art and science of filling the context window with just the right information for the next step. Just like we said, more information can actually make AI agents to become confused. So context
Mhm.
engineering is the ability to figure out a way to give it just what it needs to solve a particular problem. So you guys learn context engineering and thank us on this podcast for introducing you, putting you on
Yeah,
this.
let us know if you want deep dive on this. We're happy to
Yeah.
continue.
If you want
Yeah,
a deep dive, we're happy to get in on it. Yeah. So if you want me to do an article on context engineering also, you can just comment. We'll do an article on
yeah,
that for you. Yeah. All right. So thank you everyone for watching today's episode of 10x Developer Podcast. We hope to see you next week.